Charlie Kirk. Yeah, it's hard to ignore the chatter around him lately. Honestly, some people are expressing relief over his absence, pointing out that his brand of empathy is, in their view, harmful to society. The striking thing? Many believe his passing won't turn him into a martyr. It won't spark movements or ignite waves of change. It's largely being met with indifference by those outside his circle. Now, diving into his own controversial stance, Charlie often argued, and many strongly disagreed, that some tragic gun deaths each year are an acceptable trade-off to preserve Second Amendment rights. To him, it was a rational, prudent compromise, an unfortunate but necessary cost to protect what he considered God-given freedoms. For critics, though, this perspective firmly places him in a contentious category. Fast forward to today, and the reaction on social media is intense. Across platforms, there's an unmistakable sense of celebration among left-leaning individuals and Democrats. Some openly declare that he deserved this outcome, citing accusations of fascism, racism, or transphobia. The underlying message is chilling. Simply opposing leftist politics, according to some online voices, can make you a target. And that, right there, is the crucial distinction to note. Political disagreement has morphed, for some, into a justification for extreme consequences. Let's be clear, this isn't just some tiny corner of the internet full of a handful of extremists. If you've logged on lately and felt like a lot of people are expressing these thoughts, it's not just your imagination. Many people you know personally may share these same views. And if you're wondering whether this is merely anecdotal, confined to a specific social circle, the answer is a firm no. This mindset has moved into the mainstream of the modern left and a significant portion of the Democratic voter base. It's not a fringe belief to think that targeting someone you disagree with politically is somehow justified. Charlie Kirk, in a way, predicted this trend months ago. The culture of political assassination has been steadily creeping into left-leaning circles. Some striking numbers illustrate the scope. A few months back, 48% of liberals said that murdering Elon Musk would be at least somewhat justified, and 55% said the same about Donald Trump. This matters because now, as this spreads, the Democratic Party and mainstream media are likely to attempt distancing themselves. You'll hear vague statements about stopping political violence, thinly veiled and largely performative. They'll claim these views come from a few extremists. But that's misleading. This isn't a handful of isolated, fringe individuals in some distant city. This is widespread, and it stretches across the nation. It's a reality that cannot simply be brushed off. We're talking about literally half of the liberal Democratic voter base. Now, some will argue, you can't blame the entire left for this. Fair enough, but if nearly 50% of the base is openly endorsing extreme ideas, that's still a staggering portion. And yes, it matters. Look around on social media, and it's impossible to ignore. There's widespread celebration and glorification of political violence coming from left-leaning spaces. Conservatives and everyday Americans are noticing. This isn't subtle or hidden. It almost feels like we're living through what could be called the Third Red Scare in America. If you're unfamiliar, the first two Red Scares were periods in U.S. history marked by fear that communists were secretly infiltrating American society, undermining institutions from the inside. The paranoia was largely based on speculation, rumors of covert subversives everywhere. Today, though, the situation is markedly different. This Third Red Scare isn't theoretical. The people promoting radical ideas are openly declaring them on social media. They aren't hiding. Many are downright proud. The consequences are already visible. Across the country, people are facing real-world repercussions, including job losses, for publicly endorsing extreme statements online. This trend isn't abstract. It's a tangible, growing phenomenon reshaping political discourse and public perception. Let me emphasize this again. We're not talking about a fringe group of Antifa members hiding out in the Pacific Northwest. This mentality is spread across the entire country. It's not confined to one profession or one region. It's present among government officials, private sector employees, public sector workers, and, yes, even people you might call your neighbors. Polling data, real-world examples, and the wave of people facing consequences for promoting violence online all point to the same conclusion. Support for political violence on the left is far more common than many want to admit. And yet, the Democratic Party has never taken this seriously. For years, they've excused or downplayed violent actions, and even now, they attempt to shift the blame toward Donald Trump, ignoring the very crisis they helped create. And the problem runs deeper than just random voices on the internet. Reports suggest individuals within high-level institutions, FEMA, the U.S. military, the Department of Defense, even the Secret Service, are not immune from this mindset. Remember July 13, 2024? The day Secret Service agents failed to protect Donald Trump, an incident that raised more questions than answers. Would it really shock anyone to learn that this same red reality, as I'd call it, has even crept into those ranks? Now, let me be clear. This isn't about fearmongering, nor is it a call to violence. It's about recognizing the reality of what's happening, acknowledging how deeply this culture has spread, and asking hard questions about what it means for the future of America. Let me be clear. I'm not talking about espionage or spinning up wild conspiracy theories. What I'm trying to do is lay out the reality. This isn't some tiny, disconnected group that you'll never encounter in your life. Based on the statistics, chances are that in your day-to-day routine, you've probably crossed paths with someone who genuinely holds these views. That's how widespread this belief has become in America. And here's the thing, I don't have a neat solution for how to deal with it. All I can do is point to the pattern. Maybe some figures from history, the ones who were demonized in their time for warning about communist infiltration, weren't entirely off base. Think back to the 1950s, those infamous House committees on anti-American activities. At the time, they were ridiculed by many. But when you see the level of open celebration of violence today, you start to wonder, did they have a point? Because let's be honest, if someone is cheering for violence against people they politically disagree with, that's not just a bad take, that's reprehensible. At minimum, it should disqualify them from government positions or sensitive roles in the private sector. In fact, depending on the specifics, some of this rhetoric could legally be considered incitement. That's not a radical idea, that's common sense. So, as we go through this, I want to show you just how widespread this culture has become. No, I won't cover every single example, we'd be here all day, but the evidence is overwhelming. And by the time you see it laid out, you'll understand this isn't fringe behavior. It's a mainstream reality, and it's happening right now. What I want to highlight here isn't just a few isolated cases, it's the overall trend. These aren't one-off comments from a fringe corner of society. They are coming from professionals in different states, different careers, and even people directly responsible for shaping young minds. Take, for example, a chief officer for global learning at Miami Country Day School. In a public comment thread, this individual wrote, "He died, oh well. He ironically promoted gun usage, karma." Think about that for a second. This isn't some anonymous troll online. This is a high-ranking education professional in Florida, teaching children, openly mocking a man's death. Thankfully, after public backlash, he resigned from his position. In that case, the system worked, and the institution did the right thing. But he's far from the only one. Another case, also from Florida, involves Kelly Brook Sanchez, a teacher at Ridgeview Elementary School. She was suspended after posting. This may not be the obituary we were all hoping to wake up to, but it's a close second for me. In other words, she wished it had been Donald Trump instead of Charlie Kirk. Let that sink in. Someone entrusted with the care and education of elementary school children openly celebrating political assassination. This is what I mean when I say the problem is widespread. These aren't random extremists, they are people in positions of influence and responsibility, right in our communities. And the fact that some are only facing consequences after being exposed shows just how deeply this mindset runs. And it doesn't stop there. In Greenville County, South Carolina, yet another teacher was placed on administrative leave after celebrating the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Different state, same story. Public educators, entrusted with shaping the minds of children, openly applauding political murder. In response to this growing issue, Governor Ron DeSantis made a strong statement. His administration, through the Florida Department of Education, announced investigations into every single teacher caught celebrating Kirk's death. His message was simple: govern yourselves accordingly. And honestly, that shouldn't even need to be said. The very idea that a teacher, or anyone, really, would proudly post online support for political assassination is outrageous. It shouldn't even cross someone's mind, let alone be written down and shared publicly with their name attached. It's not just inappropriate, it's dangerous. Think about it. If people had spoken this way in the wake of JFK's assassination in the 1960s, the response from the system would have been far harsher than a suspension or job loss. Back then, the gravity of glorifying political violence was understood on a much deeper level. As DeSantis put it, we will hold teachers who choose to make disgusting comments about the horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk accountable. Govern yourselves accordingly. In other words, this is FAFO season, and the consequences are real. But here's the question we need to ask. Why hasn't every Republican governor in America, outside of DeSantis, come out and said the same thing? This shouldn't be controversial. There ought to be a unified, public declaration. If you're a public employee celebrating political assassination, you're fired, without benefits, and you may even face legal consequences. Because let's be honest, that's exactly where this needs to go. And it's not just red states that should be taking action. If Democratic governors really mean what they said yesterday, that they oppose political violence, that it's unacceptable, that they don't stand for it, then where are the consequences? Where are the investigations? Where are the task forces in their own departments of education to root this out? If their words were sincere, then the standard should be clear. Any public employee who glorifies political violence should be immediately terminated. That's the true test of whether these governors mean what they say. Will Tim Walz? Will Gavin Newsom? Will J.B. Pritzker? Will any of them stand up and publicly state, if you celebrate the assassination of Charlie Kirk while employed by my state, you will be fired? I think we all know the answer. And the reason is simple. Many of the statements we heard from Democrats yesterday were hollow, completely and totally insincere. They are more interested in optics than accountability. And that, right there, is the problem. And it doesn't end with schools or state employees. This mindset is showing up everywhere. Take money, Indiana, for example. Not exactly a place most people would associate with liberal politics. Yet there, the vice president of the city's Human Rights Commission, yes, the Human Rights Commission, was caught celebrating Charlie Kirk's assassination and even wishing for more. The irony is almost too much to process. A government official tasked with promoting human rights publicly endorsing political violence. And it's not just government roles. The Carolina Panthers, an NFL team, had to fire their communications coordinator after he posted similar comments online. Think about that. Professional sports, supposedly apolitical, now caught in the same storm of people glorifying assassination. Some might assume this kind of rhetoric is confined to teachers, activists, or government employees. But the reality is very different. It's showing up in the private sector, too. For example, a wealth manager in Norristown, Pennsylvania, working in private equity, no less, joined in, posting that Charlie Kirk was a Nazi and deserved what happened to him. This is why I keep stressing. It's everywhere. Public sector, private sector, local government, even professional sports. The pattern is undeniable. And the reach is far broader than many want to admit. And let's clear something up right now. That narrative floating around that Charlie Kirk somehow deserved this because of things he said? Completely false. He never once said the things being attributed to him. But that hasn't stopped people from inventing positions on his behalf, putting words in his mouth, and then using those made-up words as justification for why his death was acceptable. Think about that. Fabricate a political stance, assign it to your opponent, and then celebrate their assassination because of it. And this isn't just a fringe idea. Polls suggest roughly 50% of left-leaning voters, not 10%, not 5%, believe political violence like this can be justified. Half. That means 1 out of every 2 people who pulled the lever for Kamala Harris or show up at Democratic rallies might quietly, or not so quietly, support political assassination as a legitimate form of activism. If that doesn't make you stop and reconsider the state of our politics, I don't know what will. And once again, we see examples everywhere. In Phoenix, a sports news outlet cut ties with a writer who went on an entire thread mocking and excusing Kirk's death. The unemployment line is filling up with people who thought it was perfectly acceptable to glorify political murder in public. This is the reality. It's not just trolls online, it's not just random extremists, it's professionals, it's mainstream, and it's half of an entire voting bloc. And here's the twisted logic we keep seeing repeated. They draw a completely arbitrary line between what counts as a political difference and what they label hateful rhetoric. Once they've slapped that label on someone, suddenly, in their minds, assassination becomes justified. Now, let me be very clear. I don't condone this. I'm not excusing it. But the irony here is hard to ignore. Because if you accept their logic, then what's to stop someone else from flipping it in reverse? If hate is defined subjectively, then anyone can decide where that line is drawn. And once it's crossed, well, apparently, that makes violence acceptable. That is an astonishing lack of self-awareness, especially considering we're talking about nearly half the electorate adopting this mindset in a supposedly democratic system. Take this one example. Someone claimed Kirk's positions on gun control meant he wanted children to die. Completely untrue. But they framed it that way to justify celebrating his assassination. That person is now out of a job, one of the rare cases where consequences were actually delivered. But for everyone like that, many others still face no repercussions at all. And it's not just journalists or teachers. Healthcare workers have joined in, too. I've seen multiple cases of nurses posting online comments like, "He got the day he deserved." Just think about that. People whose profession is literally about preserving life, turning around and cheering for political murder. And now we're seeing it spread into healthcare. That should stop you in your tracks. These are people whose entire profession revolves around saving lives, people who take an oath to treat every patient equally. Yet some of them are openly celebrating the assassination of someone they disagreed with politically. Think about that for a moment. Would you trust a nurse or doctor who posted online that a political opponent got what he deserved to fight for your life if you were rushed into the ER? That's a chilling thought. And the irony doesn't end there. One example comes from Colorado, where a suicide prevention coordinator, yes, someone tasked with preventing death, took to social media to cheer on Kirk's killing. Suicide prevention, but also endorsing death. The contradiction is staggering. It's not just healthcare, either. A Jacksonville, Florida city government employee posted that Kirk spewed hate, so what he got back was deserved. And yet, this person still holds their job. Again, I'm not advocating violence here, but the twisted reasoning is obvious. They justify killing people they dislike politically while ignoring the fact that the same standard could easily be flipped against them. That's why this mindset isn't just dangerous, it's flat out insane. Because once you normalize violence against opponents, you're opening a door no one can control once it's swung wide. The truth is, I'm seeing this pattern everywhere. I may not be in school anymore, but messages keep pouring in. From high schools, middle schools, even colleges, where teachers and students are openly celebrating Kirk's death. And people in the comments can confirm it for themselves. It's not isolated. It feels widespread. Now let me make something clear. Charlie and I didn't always see eye to eye. I'm a woman married to another woman, and yet he still invited me onto his podcast. He welcomed me on stage at a Turning Point event. He retweeted my work. He didn't shut me out because we disagreed. He engaged. That willingness to have a dialogue mattered. And that's why watching people cheer his death is so deeply disturbing. This isn't about red or blue politics. It's about basic human decency. When my own daughter texted me today that students at her high school were celebrating, it hit me hard. What kind of culture are we raising where children are taught to rejoice in someone's death? Something is profoundly broken in this country. The rhetoric, the division, the habit of turning opponents into enemies, it has to stop. But the danger doesn't end in classrooms. Some of the very same attitudes are showing up in federal offices and even the military. I've already seen examples of men in uniform who are legally bound to remain apolitical, mocking Kirk's death as ironic and laughing it off. That's not just inappropriate. It's alarming. Think about this for a moment. Some of these people are working in professions where they literally carry firearms. That's not a small detail. It should raise red flags. Take one example, a US Marine officer openly toasting Kirk's death, raising a beer as if it was something to celebrate. These aren't fringe voices on the internet. These are individuals inside our military. And it doesn't stop there. Another case involves a data analyst at FEMA, yes, the same FEMA that operates under the Department of Homeland Security. After Kirk's assassination, this employee posted on Instagram, "Half-mast for the literal racist, homophobe, misogynist? Be for real."